school. Bullies dared each other to trip a marching royal guard, thinking he'd just be another helpless victim. But when one boy actually tried it, the guard's response wasn't just unexpected, it changed the arrogant teenager forever. Here's what happened when ceremony turned into a lesson none of them would forget. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow at this same time, we're dropping another powerful Royal Guard story you won't want to miss. People say the Royal Guards can stand so still that birds mistake them for statues. Their discipline is so legendary, they wouldn't flinch even if a bomb went off. Their faces stay perfectly expressionless, no matter what tourists do to try and crack them. For years, visitors from around the world have tried and failed to get a reaction from these elite soldiers in their iconic red uniforms and tall bearskin hats. But on this particular Tuesday morning, as sunlight filled the palace courtyard and tourists gathered with their cameras ready, no one could have predicted that the biggest challenge to a guard's legendary composure would come from a 16-year-old boy with something to prove and no idea what he was about to face. The peaceful atmosphere shattered when a group of 34 teenagers in navy blue blazers arrived, their loud voices cutting through the quiet like a foghorn. St. Bartholomew's Academy, prestigious on paper, problematic in practice, had arrived for their annual history field trip. Class, gather round and lower your voices. Miss Bennet's attempt at authority was drowned out by the noise. At 28, her 4 years of teaching hadn't prepared her for managing this particular mix of privilege and rebellion. Why are we even here? To watch guys in stupid hats stand around. Jason Harrington's voice cut through the chatter, loud enough for nearby tourists to hear. His designer shoes worth more than Miss Bennet's monthly salary scuffed carelessly against the historic stones as he slouched, hands shoved deep in his pockets. The Queen's Guard represents over 300 years of military tradition, Oliver Parker replied, adjusting his glasses. Despite being Jason's usual target for mockery, Oliver's love for history never wavered. Active duty soldiers. More like active duty mannequins, Jason snorted, earning laughter from his friends. Standing around like furniture with feathers on their heads. Miss Bennet stepped between them, sensing trouble. That's enough, Jason. We're guests here, and I expect you to behave. As the guards marched into position, their movements perfectly synchronized after countless hours of training, Jason decided to put on a show for his friends. He pulled his blazer tight, exaggerated his posture, and goose-stepped in a ridiculous imitation. "Look at me. I'm a royal guard," he announced, puffing out his chest. "I spent 3 hours ironing my uniform just to stand in the sun while pigeons use me for target practice." His friends burst into laughter, phones raised to record his antics. The nearest guard didn't react. His face remained stone-cold, eyes fixed forward. Only the tiniest tightening of his jaw might have hinted he'd even noticed. "Jason, stop that immediately," Miss Bennet hissed, rushing over. "That's extremely disrespectful." "Come on, Miss B," Jason protested, rolling his eyes. "It's just a joke. They're literally paid to stand there and get photographed. We're giving the tourists a show." Oliver stepped forward, his usually soft voice sharp with frustration. "Actually, these soldiers have all served in combat zones, Iraq, and more. The ceremonial duty is just one small part of their service." "Nobody asked you, Parker," one of Jason's friends snapped. "Why don't you go polish their boots while you're at it?" A nearby family with young children moved away, the parents shooting disapproving looks at the rowdy school group. Other tourists whispered among themselves, clearly uncomfortable. Jason, encouraged by the attention, kept going. "Even their hats are ridiculous. What poor animal died to make those? Is that why they look so miserable? Guilt over the bear genocide?" The changing of the guard's ceremony continued. the soldiers' polished boots moving in perfect rhythm against the ancient stones. For most visitors, it was a breathtaking display of tradition. For Jason, it was just another chance to show off. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced loudly, stepping away from his group and addressing nearby tourists like a tour guide. "Welcome to the Royal Puppet Show, where grown men dress up in doll costumes and pretend they're important. Marvel at their ability to ignore basic human needs like scratching, blinking, or acknowledging reality. Jason." Miss Bennet grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "One more word, and you're waiting on the bus." Several tourists turned away in disgust. A Japanese family, who had traveled thousands of miles to see the ceremony, moved further down the courtyard, their disappointed expressions saying everything. Oliver closed his notebook with a sharp snap. "They can hear you. They're trained soldiers, not statues. They stay composed because of discipline, not because they're unaware." "All discipline," Jason mocked, wiggling his fingers. "Where I'm from, we call that being whipped. Look at them, marching like robots left, right, left, right." He started an exaggerated march, knees lifted absurdly high. 3 of his friends joined in, forming a ridiculous imitation of the guards' precision. Their blazers were messy, ties loose, as they paraded in a circle, making sound effects with each step. "Stop this now." Miss Bennet's voice cut through their performance. "You are embarrassing yourselves and the entire school." "Come on, Miss B," Jason said, smirking. "Even you have to admit this whole thing is ridiculous. It's the 21st century, and we're watching guys with feather dusters on their heads pretend it's still 1700. That's enough." Miss Bennet's patience was gone. "One more word, Jason, and you'll be explaining to your father why you're suspended from the lacrosse finals." The threat hit home. Lacrosse was Jason's ticket to university if his father's money couldn't fix a suspension with scouts watching. He backed off, but the restless energy still simmered. His friends gathered around him, whispering. "Hey, Ryan," the boldest of Jason's group, nudged him. "Bet you can't make one of them react." Jason's interest sparked. "What kind of bet?" $10 says you can't even get one to look at you," another friend offered, already reaching for his wallet. "Make it 20. A third added. Jason grinned. "You're on, but let's make it interesting. 50 total. I bet I can do more than make him look. I bet I can make him break formation." The boys pooled their money, phones ready to capture the moment. "What's your plan?" Ryan asked, keeping his voice low as Miss Bennet glanced their way. Jason watched the guards' marching pattern, studying their timing. They marched like clockwork, same path, same speed, every time. "All I have to do is be in the right place at the right moment." He mimed bumping into someone. "You're gonna touch a guard?" one friend asked, suddenly nervous. "That's not just getting kicked out, that's actual trouble." "Relax," Jason said, rolling his eyes. "I'll just accidentally step into his path while checking my phone. If he's so perfectly trained, he'll avoid me, right?" His smirk said he was counting on the opposite. Oliver, who had overheard enough, stepped forward, concerned. "Jason, interfering with the guards is a real offense. They're not just ceremonial, they're active duty soldiers. You could get in serious trouble." Jason laughed. "Oh, look who's appointed himself palace security. Better hide, 'cause Oliver's calling the Queen's secret police." Miss Bennet, noticing the huddle, walked over. "Jason, I hope you're not planning something that'll make me regret not sending you back to the bus already." "Just discussing history, Miss B," Jason said innocently. Oliver was explaining how these guards are the real deal, real soldiers, real training. Very impressive stuff. As the guards marched past, Jason watched closely, timing his move. "Gay. Wait for it," he muttered to his friends. "When they make the next turn, I'll step out like I'm distracted by my phone. Perfect timing." The guards approached their turning point, rifles held at the exact same angle, eyes forward. Jason began his act, pretending to scroll on his phone while drifting toward their path. Oliver, realizing what was about to happen, called out, "Jason, don't. This isn't a joke." Miss Bennet's head snapped up. "Jason Harrington, stop right there." But Jason was committed. As the lead guard turned, Jason stepped forward right into his path. Except the guard wasn't there. Jason had expected the soldier to either stop or bump into him. Instead, the guard had adjusted his stride just enough to avoid him entirely. Jason, caught off balance, stumbled forward, his phone flying, arms windmilling before crashing to the ground in an undignified heap. The guard didn't even glance at him. The formation continued, unbroken. For one perfect second, the courtyard was silent. Then came the laughter, not just from tourists, but from Jason's own friends, their phones capturing every second of his humiliation. "Did you see that? He totally ate it." One howled. Jason scrambled up, face burning. "He pushed me." He lied, desperate to save face. "Did you see that? He made me fall." Nobody bought it. Even his classmates were muttering that he'd gone too far. Miss Bennet stormed over, furious. "What I saw was you trying to interfere with a guard, failing spectacularly, and now blaming others for your own stupidity." A palace security officer approached. "Is there a problem here?" Before Miss Bennet could answer, Jason blurted, "That guard made me fall. I could sue for assault." The officer didn't blink. "Young man, the guard's routes are clearly marked and we have CCTV of the entire area. Would you like to reconsider your statement?" Jason paled. They had video of his prank. "I might have misjudged," he muttered. Miss Bennet apologized to the officer, promising consequences. Then something unexpected happened. The lead guard, the one Jason had tried to trip, broke from his position and walked toward them. The crowd gasped. The Queen's Guard never broke protocol. The soldier stopped in front of Jason, his voice calm but commanding. "Guardsman, First Class David Mitchell, formerly of the 1st Battalion, Afghanistan. 2 tours. Iraq, 1 tour. 6 years of combat service before this posting." The weight of those words hung in the air. "The uniform you mocked is worn by soldiers who've served in conditions you can't imagine," he continued. "We've pulled wounded comrades from burning vehicles, made split-second decisions that decided who lived or died. Every guard here has earned this position through sacrifice, not as a demotion, but as an honor." Jason stood frozen, his usual arrogance gone. "This uniform isn't a costume, it's a symbol of centuries of service. The discipline you laughed at, that's what keeps soldiers alive in war. The stoicism you mocked, that's the control that lets us function under fire." Key locked eyes with Jason. "When you tried to disrupt my duty, you weren't just disrespecting me, you were disrespecting every man and woman who's worn this uniform, many of whom died for the freedoms you take for granted." Jason swallowed hard. I didn't know. Care. That's the problem," the guard said, not unkindly. "You didn't think. You saw tradition and mocked it instead of trying to understand it." He then explained the history behind the ceremony, how every detail, from the marching to the uniforms, represented something deeper. The students listened, phones forgotten, actually learning for once. By the end, even Jason's friends looked ashamed. ... Miss Bennet made Jason apologize, and for once, he meant it. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't understand what any of this really meant." The guard nodded. "Education is better than punishment. But I trust your teacher will make sure this lesson sticks." "Oh, she will," Miss Bennet said firmly, starting with a very long research paper on military traditions. Jason actually agreed without complaint. As the group left, Oliver offered, "The library has great books on this stuff if you need help." Surprisingly, Jason nodded. Yeah, maybe I'll take you up on that. Miss Bennet smiled. Some lessons couldn't be taught in a classroom. What would you have done in the guard's position? Would you have used the moment to teach, or demanded punishment? Have you ever misjudged someone based on appearances, only to realize there was more to them? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story about respect and tradition, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss our next video. Check out our other Royal Guard stories on screen now, and we'll see you tomorrow with another powerful tale. Until then, stay respectful.